Hello everybody and welcome to my review of One Piece chapter 997, manga chapter. People are out of control. This is getting out of hand. Listen, my last two videos were perfect foreshadowing of this mess. It turns out that the Reddit thread for this chapter had to be shut down. The comment section had to be locked down because people were getting way too toxic. So this is a mod, and this is what the mod had to say about it. So he says, or she says, I don't know, he says, for context, in case you don't know, this thread became a cesspool of toxicity between quote-unquote fans of Zoro and Sanji. Imagine the worst thread you ever saw, multiply it by 10. As a result, there were multiple bans, comments removed, and the thread was locked for 12 hours or so. And as of this recording, that spoiler thread has over 9,000 comments. Almost 10,000 comments, in fact. 9,800. And they locked it for 12 hours. So you can just imagine how many comments it would have if it hadn't been locked. Both the beginning of the chapter and the cover page feature Sanji, and the cover page pretty much depicts Oda's intentions when it comes to Sanji's character, at least for the time being, because the page is kind of like a summary of what ends up happening in the actual chapter. Sanji gets distracted and changes his attention and course of action because of a woman, and then by the end, a Santori-wielding raccoon comes in to inflict some damage. So this whole thing is pretty much on the nose. Oda's not even trying to hide it at this point anymore. And I feel like ultimately a lot of us fans that have been reading this series for a while now pretty much have accepted this undeniable fact, which is that Oda loves Zoro. I mean, he loves him so much. The only character that Oda loves more than Zoro is Luffy. Like, for example, right? We know that Oda gave all of the Straw Hats real-world nationalities, right? Or a country of origin. So in Zoro's case, Oda said that Zoro would be Japanese. He would be from Japan. Now, Wano, which is arguably the most important arc in the series thus far, and was revealed to be the land of the strongest pirates in the previous chapter, Wano is based on Edo period Japan, okay? Oda has been wanting to draw this arc for ages. He's been wanting to get to this moment for billions and billions of years. So what does that tell you? Right? You have any idea how much national pride is being poured on the page by this man at this point? Again, Zoro is Japanese, so there was no way that Oda wasn't gonna hype up his boy in this arc. I hate my life. I feel like this is just the beginning of Oda having Zoro flex in this arc. But then again, he'll have Sanji flex as well at some point. He has to give something to Sanji to keep the rivalry alive. And speaking of Japanese heritage, that scene with Sanji actually has several references to it. The first and most obvious one is the sash pull, or obi spin, and that basically refers to a period piece routine that also appears in some kabuki plays, where a pervy lord undresses a damsel by pulling off their sash and spins her like a top. Now, the damsel in this case really reminds me of Sarahebi, which is the history teacher that we saw back in Act 1, who was teaching the false history of Wano to kids in the capital. Now, back then, I think a lot of us thought that she was actually a mythical type Zoan, that she maybe had like the Roku Rokubi yokai snake ghost devil fruit of sorts, but it turns out that she's actually a gifter. At least that's what the wiki has her as a gifter. So in this case, I think it has to be her because I double-checked her design. It's the same one. Everything from the pattern in her kimono to the way she wears her hair to the flower on her head is pretty much identical to the character in this chapter. The only thing is that at one point she did appear in a previous chapter in the background with black horns, and in this chapter she has white horns. But that's pretty much it. Everything else seems to match perfectly. So if she's a gifter, that means the man that is with her has to be a gifter as well. And I think he's the one with spider powers. I think he's the one who made the net for Sanji as a trap. And I think that's a reference to the Japanese legend of Tsuchigumo, or the earth spider. Now, just like Sarahebi's appearance was a reference to a Japanese yokai or a Japanese demon, so is the spider. The way the story goes, or the way the kabuki play goes, goes is that once upon a time, there was this lord called Yorimitsu, and Yorimitsu fell ill. And so one night, a priest came to him offering his services to see if he could actually cure Yorimitsu. And so Yorimitsu said, okay, fine, give it a shot, whatever. But just before the priest was able to do anything, one of Yorimitsu's men, one of his retainers, whose name was Kinmon, not Kinemon, but Kinmon, noticed that the priest's shadow was shaped like a spider. So the priest wasn't really a priest, he was a spider demon. So Yorimitsu took his sword and wounded the priest, but he managed to escape. Fortunately, however, because of the wound, the spider left a trail of blood that Yorimitsu and his retainers could follow to the spider's hideout. The spider's hideout is actually in a tomb or a cave or something, and so that's where Yorimitsu confronts the spider and ultimately ends up killing the spider. And so I feel like maybe that's what's going to happen here with Sanji, where he should be able to burn the threads using hell memories, and Sanji doesn't fight women, but he can fight the spider dude, no problem. Probably a one-shot. He did say he was in a hurry, so I do think he's going to get out of there soon.
Then again, he does end up falling in love with Black Maria, so that could delay him a bit. Now, in both of the official translations that I read, Sanji says something to the effect of like, if you untie me, I won't hold this against you. Or if you untie me, I'll forget this ever happened. So to me, that implies that he can kind of take care of himself in this situation. It's just going to be the infatuation that's going to be the issue. Now, the dialogue from the enemies kind of suggests that Sanji isn't the first person to fall into this trap. Like, they have other victims, and so if you look at the page where we see Black Maria, behind her, there's actually like some people, some men, I think. Their bodies kind of look like they're floating, so I wonder if they're hanging there from a spider thread or something.
We get two gifters waiting on the stairs that lead to the 4th floor. Obviously, both of them are named after card games. Poker is self-explanatory, and Mazurka is actually a Polish card game. And we've never seen Poker before. I think this is the first time that we've seen Poker, but Mazurka we've seen already. She appears in chapter 978 for the first time when Queen was introducing the gifters, and then she also appears in chapter 980 in the panel where we see Hacha's silhouette for the first time. So she's been there as well. Now, unfortunately for those two gifters, they're basically just left sitting on the stairs because the allies of Udon help Luffy up to the 4th floor by building a ladder. So that's how Jinbei and Luffy are going to get to the 4th floor, completely shortcutting and avoiding Mazurka and Poker.
Last week, Kid and Killer were on the 3rd floor, right? And so in this chapter, Poker says that Kid already passed by them. So that means that Kid has to be on the 4th floor at this point. And that's where Luffy is headed. So that means that Luffy and Kid are probably going to run into each other in the next chapter or so.
We cut away from that and have Big Mom reaching the top of the dome via the hole in the roof, and just as she flies out of there, we see a tiny speck of an item falling down from the opening to land right around where Zoro is standing. And so later on, Robin reveals that that item that fell down was actually Kiku's arm. So that clank sound that we see Zoro hear was actually him noticing Kiku's arm landing. That right there is the moment where Zoro realizes that he has to start taking things more seriously, because his friends are losing limbs up in the roof. He also sees that Omasa, the Yakuza boss, is almost completely frozen, and then there's this very strange scene with Chopper and Brook, where Brook is using fire on Chopper. I mean, he's using it to keep him warm, to stop the ice from spreading, but I was like, where did Brook get that fire from? Is this a new technique? Is that his sword that he's using? Can Brook now create fire in addition to ice? Is that his spiritual ghost flame of sorts? Or did he actually have to rub two sticks together to get that flame?
There's an Oni man that's about to attack Zoro from behind, but Zoro just kind of swipes him away. And then we go to Apoo, who is busy blocking Drake with his tonfas. And it looks like he's blocking Drake with one arm, but he is sweating. You see some really thick sweat drops coming from Apoo in that panel. All right, so he is sweating Drake. Granted, it's hybrid Drake. And then we hear the Zoro theme music that goes do-do-do-do-do-do. I just noticed that in the panel of Apoo's face, his veins are sort of popping out of his face because he's so focused on being able to keep Drake at bay. And then for a moment, everything goes silent. And then you hear it. "I told you. Shisunsun." At least I'm assuming that's Shisunsun. And what's most interesting to me about that page is, well, a couple of things. First one is Drake's reaction. His face looks like this after the cut. He just looks shocked. Like, one moment he was trying to get past Apoo's guard, and then the next Apoo's spitting out blood, right? And if you look at the panel of the cut, it seems like Zoro just cut right through Apoo's guard, right? Because you see the tonfa being split, being cut with the motion of Zoro. So it's one clean swipe. That's what Chisunsun is. I believe he's using Wado Ichimonji for the cut. And I know, like, some people are going to say, I mean, look at that. Like, Zoro took down Apoo, and he didn't even have to use Enma for it. But you have to remember that Enma and Wado Ichimonji are swords of the same rank. That being said, this is still a great feat for Zoro. That's yet another supernova that he manages to take out. Now, I don't think that Apoo is completely done, because I still think that what's left for him to do is to switch sides, right? To sort of say, like, you know, I regret my decision of joining the Beast Pirates. I'm going to join the Alliance. That's what's left. He also introduced us to the numbers, so maybe there's more information that he can divulge about them. Also, at one point, Queen said that if Apoo failed to win the game, that Queen was going to kill him. So again, he has to switch sides. That's what he needs to come back for. We get a nice Zoro and Chopper moment there, where Zoro is handing Chopper the antidote. They feel like brothers in that panel, and I remember that Oda revealed in an SBS that if the Straw Hats were a family, that Zoro would be the oldest son, and that Chopper would be like the baby, like the youngest. So Chopper says that he's figured out the cure, and that he's gonna make enough antibodies for everybody, friend or foe, because that's what good doctors do. Chopper says that the bullets were infused with some gas, and so every time that I think of gas, I think of Caesar Clown, so I wonder if he had anything to do with the production of these bullets. However, Oda says that he's not done yet. He's not finished hyping up his Japanese boy just yet, so he has Zoro send a slash over to where Queen is. And that takes care of the machine gun, putting an end to the rain of ice-oni bullets on everyone. And then the whole thing turns into a scene from Gladiator, because Zoro starts yelling out at Queen, "Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here? Are you not entertained?" Before we got to Wano, Kaido accused Luffy and Law of just playing little pirate games up until this point. So, like, the fact that Zoro's saying, like, what are these little pirate games that you're playing, is kind of flipping the tables on Kaido's words. Now, when it comes to Zoro's direct statement about Kaido, I read some other translations that had Zoro say that Kaido was the strongest in the world, right? And that he was going to cut the strongest in the world. But for this case, I actually think the official English translation makes a lot more sense. Zoro says, "They say Kaido's the toughest guy in the world." Notice how he says, "they say," right? Compare that statement to what Killer said in the previous chapter. Like, Killer seems a lot more sure of himself, right? Because he says, like, that's the strongest pirate, period. Whereas Zoro says, "they say," kind of like it's like something that's been passed down from mouth to mouth. Like, it's a rumor kind of a thing. They say Kaido's the toughest guy in the world. And he doesn't say strongest, he says toughest. And so I think the word toughest fits better in this context, because as a swordsman, Zoro is interested in cutting things or substances that are tough. And so I think that bit of dialogue here pretty much confirms that Zoro is going to be the one to reopen Kaido's scar that Odin left. Also, I think that if Zoro had said that Kaido is actually the strongest in the world, not just the strongest pirate, but the strongest in the world, period, you would automatically need to compare and contrast those words with Killer's words in the last chapter. And between the two, I actually have to give the edge to Killer. I actually have to believe more what Killer says, because Killer has been in the New World longer than Zoro. So yeah, I'm glad that the official translation used the word toughest instead of strongest, because I think using the word strongest would just confuse everything, especially comparing it to the last chapter and what Killer said then. One moment, Kaido is the strongest pirate, and then in the next chapter, he's declared as the strongest in the world, period, right? Even though Zoro doesn't really know about Aim or Emu. He doesn't know about Dragon. He doesn't know about Akainu. So it just confuses things. So yeah, I'm glad that the word toughest was used here instead of strongest. And again, Zoro also says, they say, right? That's what people say. That's like the word of mouth. That being said, if somebody out there knows Japanese and actually read the original text, please let me know down in the comment section what it said in the original Japanese. Did it say toughest or strongest? Or was it a character that could potentially mean both? Just clear that up, because I think if it actually says strongest in the world, period, I think that opens up Pandora's box. I think that opens up a pretty big can of worms. Because if Zoro is saying strongest, I think you have to question his words a little bit more, right? Like, if he says strongest in the world, you have to ask, okay, how does he know that? Who is he comparing Kaido to, and all that stuff. Whereas if it's just toughest, and he has like people say, that just makes more sense. Anyway, as Zoro's calling out Queen, the earth begins to shake, begins to tremble, and Brook mistakes that with Zoro using King's Haki. Now, I already made an entire video talking about the Straw Hats, who I think will get King's Haki by the end of series. You can check it out if you want. Zoro is included in that video as well. So all I'm gonna say is that I think it's kind of funny that the earth trembles and Brook says, oh my gosh, like, this is your King's Haki. And Zoro says, like, no, that's not me doing it. Whereas if you compare a similar moment with Usopp and Dressrosa, do you remember when Law, Doflamingo, and Fujitora were fighting in Greenbit and Usopp was with the Tontaras underground? The same thing happens. The earth begins to shake and the Tontaras are like, what is this earthquake? What's causing this trembling? And then Usopp says, that's my Haki. So I think it's kind of funny how like Zoro completely owns up to it and says, that's not me, whereas Usopp takes advantage of the quake to claim that he has King's Haki. And so now that the ice problem is going to be taken care of in the main floor, that frees up Zoro to focus his attention on getting up to the roof. He actually says, I wish I could fly up there. And I'm like, well, gee, if only there was a flying first Yonko commander level character headed your way.
So yeah, Marco appears all of a sudden and he's like, hey, you guys are the Straw Hats. Aren't you guys the main characters? What are you still doing on this floor? I'm Marco and I'm going to be your elevator. So like I said before in a previous review, depending on the urgency, Marco can actually fulfill two roles. Number one, like I said, he can actually take Zoro up to the roof, maybe fight King there while he's at it, and he can also use his special flames to heal people that have been infected with the Ice Oni bullets. Now I will say that I am a bit concerned here for Marco in terms of him actually healing everybody who's frozen, because I can just imagine this scenario where he uses his powers to heal people that are being consumed by the ice, and then after he's done, he's like, oh, I spent so much energy healing these people. I'm sorry, Straw Hats. I won't be of much use to you after I do this. I'll have to heal up, conserve my energy or something. You know what I mean? Like, he's down on energy because he used his powers to help people. And I'm only saying this because as of right now, I think that Oda has been sort of writing Marco the same way that he wrote Sabo in Dressrosa. They're both really cool characters that show up. They're both friends with Luffy. They're both very popular among fans. But because they're so strong, Oda has to find something for them to do that doesn't really interfere too much with the main conflict of the arc.
So the island starts shaking because Kaido is about to pull an Age of Ultron here. And make no mistake, this is a Whitebeard level feat. Apparently there's already a theory out there that states that perhaps Onigashima was actually the island of God's Valley where Zebek died, right? And so I thought about it and I was like, okay, let's think about it and see if it makes sense. Let's see if it fits. So first of all, I do like the idea of Kaido being so attached to his previous captain, like having so much affection towards Rocks that he decided to lift up the island where Rocks died and make that his castle. I really like that idea. I also like the idea of Kaido having a floating castle just in general. Now you can say, wait a minute, Sawyer, didn't we get a picture of what God's Valley looks like in chapter 957? And yes, we did. And so you can say, well, it doesn't really match. Like, the designs are pretty different. And you would be right. And I don't know if this is what the theory says or if this is how the theory explains it, but like the way that I would justify it is that maybe the picture of God's Valley that we got in chapter 957 is just a portion, a part of the actual island, and that maybe the skull of Onigashima was underwater. And so the whole thing would just turn out to be a matter of perspective. Then again, in this chapter we find out, as the island is shaking, somebody says, "Help! This has never happened before," kind of implying that the island has never moved like that before. So I don't know if it makes sense that it did move at one point or that it has moved in the past. Regardless of whether it comes true or not, I think it's a great idea. It explains why Sengoku says that the island of God's Valley just suddenly vanished, right? Never to be found. Maybe it's because Kaido lifted it up and took the island with him. Plus, the theory would also serve to explain why it was that Marco said, "Oh, so they're calling that island Onigashima now," kind of implying that in the past, Onigashima had a different name. Also, in chapter 957, we get a panel of Garp all bloodied up and stuff, and if you look at the background, the mountains, or the type of terrain, is similar to the cliffs and mountains in Onigashima as well. And Jinbei does notice that there's something weird about the structure of the island or something, so I wonder if he knows anything about it. So whoever came up with that theory, that's amazing. Shout out to you. Even if it doesn't come true, pat yourself on the back. It's a great idea. Also, according to a column written by Ochimusa 108, there is a very famous Japanese saying involving fathers that goes Jishin, Kaminari, Kaji, Ojaji, which basically translates to earthquake, thunder, fire, and father. So Kaido being the father figure here for Yamato, it's very fitting that we have seen Kaido now use fire, thunder, wind as well, and he creates an earthquake in this chapter, completing the traditional Japanese saying. We get a quick shot of Nami and Tama noticing the quake, and Tama actually has a moment that is very reminiscent of Momonosuke's old punk Hazard days, where because they're both supposed to be samurai, and samurai are supposed to conceal their emotions, keep their feelings to themselves, Tama pretends that she's not scared, just like Momonosuke pretended that he wasn't hungry back in Punk Hazard, even though he was starving. We get a shot of Law's crew inside the Polar Tang, and they can't dock anywhere, they can't park, and so they should just keep going over to the mainland, and that way they can meet up with Law when his flight lands. We get several shots of different characters all over Onigashima. We have Kid there, for example, and if I were Kid, what I would do in this situation is I would get out, go to the entrance, and take that giant sword, that metal sword, and ride it like a surfboard, and then just float around on it until things settle down. That's what you gotta do sometimes, right? That's what the mods did on Reddit. So that's my advice for a Kid. You know, just grab that sword and float around on it until things calm down. We also get a shot of Black Maria, and I love how her comment pretty much implies that she knew exactly what Kaido was planning on doing. So she's just like, well, there he goes. He's picking up islands again. What are you gonna do? We get a shot of Yamato escaping, carrying Shinobu and Momonosuke. Shinobu's expression in those panels is gold. She looks completely passed out, and it turns out that Yamato is already too late because the island is already levitating, and you see a bit of Kaido's flame there. And I guess the strategy was to try and get Momonosuke away from Onigashima, right? Away from the danger. And I think like this would be a really good opportunity for Yamato if Yamato has a flying mythical devil fruit to show it, right? To use her power, activate it, and then use that to get Momonosuke to safety. Nevertheless, I also think it's important to remember that Momonosuke can also transform into a flying mythical creature. And so one of the things that has been unresolved in regards to Momonosuke's character arc is that he doesn't like to fly. He seems to be afraid of heights. He doesn't like to fly. And so now would be a really good time for Momonosuke to overcome that fear of heights and be able to fly Yamato and Shinobu to safety. So this is essentially what Yamato is referring to. It's the special type of fire that Dragon Form Kaido uses to be able to fly. And it's also the exact same fire that we see wrapped around the base
of Onigashima as it flies into the sky. So no more dragon form Kaido, at least not for a while, because I think the price that Kaido has to pay to be able to lift up the island is that he has to sacrifice his ability to fly while he's a dragon. Otherwise, this ability is just way too broken. So similar to what I said about Marco using his healing powers, I think that this could also be a way of Oda possibly nerfing Kaido for the time being, because if he's using a portion of his attention and energy to be able to lift up the island, then if somebody attacks him, he won't really be at full capacity. So we might get a repetition of the scenario that we got back in Dressrosa, where Fujitora was using part of his energy and power to lift up a bunch of rubble over Dressrosa, and then Luffy was able to push him back using Gear 3rd, despite the fact that Luffy was below 1st Yonko Commander level at the time. So I wouldn't be too surprised if something similar happens here with Kaido. Now, because Big Mom is coming his way, I definitely think that this could be an opportunity for there to be a big reveal about Zebek, about their previous captain, Rocks. Like, there could be like a pause in the action because of him moving the island. Like, Kaido could be like, "Whoa-do-do-do-do. Sit around the campfire, everybody. It's flashback time. Pass the marshmallows. Should I start Lin, or do you want to go first?" Kaido's ability also got me thinking about Momonosuke and how he can create like actual clouds in his dragon form to be able to walk in the air. So maybe in the future, Momonosuke will be able to do the same thing that Kaido did in this chapter, and maybe he'll be able to lift up islands with his clouds as well. So it could all link back to that theory about Momonosuke possibly having a connection with the ancient weapon Uranus, because Uranus was the god of the sky.
And so the chapter ends giving us a pretty good idea of what the plan of the new Onigashima would mean or would look like for Kaido. Now, this whole thing could end up going wrong very, very quickly. For example, if Kaido drops the island accidentally into the ocean, into the water, it'll create a tsunami that will hit the mainland, all right, and kill a bunch of people. Now, if Kaido lets the island just crash onto Orochi's castle in the capital, it'll also kill a lot of people because it'll be the equivalent of a meteor hitting Wano. So either the island gets destroyed in the air by the Supernova Alliance, and I mean like really destroyed, like you have to turn that thing into dust, into like very small fragments that doesn't hurt people. Or Kaido finds a way of landing that whole thing as slowly and gracefully as possible in the capital. But even then, we're still talking about a bunch of buildings being demolished. That's why I said that there could be a pause in the action, because Kaido could potentially use the island as a way to blackmail the Alliance. Like he could say to Luffy, okay, you know what? If you attack me right now, if we go at it, then I'm just gonna drop this whole thing and a whole bunch of people are gonna die. I mean, Kid probably wouldn't care about that, so he would just go ahead. But maybe Luffy tries to stop him, and maybe we get Kid versus Luffy. You know how Tama said last week that she got a ride to Onigashima on an enemy ship? Well, in the last page I was trying to look for like any type of ship that could have given Tama a ride. And there's one there, I think, but yeah, I couldn't make out what it was. I also thought about how the Big Mom pirates right now are probably at the bottom of the waterfall just looking up, like just seeing this enormous island float up into view. What is going on up there? That's gonna do it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I thought the chapter was very good. Let me know what you thought about it down below in the comments section, and also about the points that I raised throughout this video. Take care. Catch you guys later. Bye.